All right, so I'm Mike Reynolds. I'm an MVP from the United States. I'm over here to talk about design patterns, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And what I mean by that is pretty much like design patterns are cool, but sometimes they can go awry. And I'm just going to talk through some code and blah, 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 and make it fun. All right, so I'm just going to talk about what design patterns are. So basically, it's just a reusable thing that, for a problem that other people have done, and your particular thing might be a little different, but somebody else has solved this for you, and you can kind of use their stuff to do it. And it's just basically stuff that has been used in the field, like off and on since probably the 1980s or 90s. Basically, the other good thing about them is it's a common language for us. So like you can say, oh, this is architected with the template method pattern over here, and we have a decorator over here, strategy over here. So it's just a way for us to kind of quickly talk about things with other architects and developers. And keep in mind, it's not a cookie cutter solution. So basically, you can't just grab code from some other solution, throw it into your new solution, and just say, oh, this all works. This is great. Don't think about design patterns like that. And there's some caveats to them that I'm going to talk about in a second. So originally, it came from actually this guy named Christopher Alexander. He was a professor at Harvard. He taught about architecture, but not solutions architecture, but more like building buildings and planning cities and things like that. Kent Beck and Ward Cunningham presented this. They started actually trying this stuff in the software field. And then they actually presented at this Oops Law conference, back in 1987. But are they always good? Well, sometimes you might end up with something that looks like this. By the way, my birthday is next Sunday. I need one of these. If anybody will buy me that, please see me afterwards. Or you can get stuff like this. I also want that too. All right, so I'm going to talk about 3 design patterns today. I'm going to, go through a lot of code, so hopefully we don't run out of time. But so the first pattern I'm going to talk about is the decorator pattern. Basically, you can think about this as like a wrapper. The adapter pattern is also a wrapper, but this is a wrapper of a thing, kind of like the thing that's wrapping it. Basically, they, think about them as having the same interface, and then you can kind of just plug into the things that come with that interface. So this is what it would look like. It's a particular design. So basically, over here, you have a component, and then you have a concrete component which implements an interface called decorator. And basically, these are the methods that are defined on it. This guy is, since it's a minor sign, it's private. And then this guy's, he's going to be public or protected or something like that. And then this guy, there's a concrete decorator for this stuff down here. So this is how it's all tied together. This seems like it's overkill to me. Like, you don't need all this stuff. You can just have an interface called decorator, and then you just have a class that implements it, and then another class that implements it, and then the other class takes an instance of the other one into it, if that makes any sense. So let's see an example real quickly. So, oh wait, what happened? So, yeah, let's see some code. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show patch config files first to kind of talk about how all the code will play in together, and hopefully it plays nicely. So in this instance, basically what I'm doing here is I'm wrapping, an out-of-the-box HTTP request begin pipeline processor. And what I'm doing here is I'm wrapping it with another one, but mine is basically going to look in the ID table and figure out, hey, I need to take one URL and kind of rewrite it to go to another page inside of my content tree. So that's what I have here. I'm defining this HTTP request to begin pipeline processor. And then I'm basically replacing the out-of-the-box one here like this. And I'm passing in values that are going to be properties on my class. And then this is the type that I'm creating. So if we jump over to some code and we take a look at that. 1 second. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Oops, wrong one. So that's basically what this guy is doing, is he's using the item table API to grab things out in the database. So what we're doing here is we're actually getting the item. Yeah, sure. Here we go. Yeah, remind me if it happens again, because I typically forget doing that. So I'm grabbing, I'm taking the actual URL that's there. I'm grabbing the item. If there is no item, basically I just hand it off to the out-of-the-box one that's injected in here using the configuration factory. If we found him, we just set him like this. So the get item, basically what he's doing is he's grabbing, he's trying to find an entry in the ID table for that. So there's a key and a value here in this table. And the key is going to be the URL. And then the value is good. And then we can grab the ID of the item that's set on it. And then we can grab that item like here. And then we return it, set it as the context item. So that's pretty much all this is doing. Doing due diligence and checking for nulls and things like that. So here's an example. So here's an example. I have this page called, can you guys see that? I have a page called subpage 4 that lives under this cat page 2. He has an image on him. He has title field, subtitle field, and he has a rich text field. Nothing crazy here. I like the image because it's Mario Brothers on cat. But. And then we have our ID table entry. So here's the key, whoops, Mario. And then the prefix is what's injected into that, because you can have, use the ID table for multiple things if you wanted to. A lot of people like to use it for URL rewrites and things. And then we have our item ID for that entry. And that ID is for that sub page, Mario Brothers cat page. And so if we navigate to it, I actually put up some views, some quick MVC views to spit out, details about the item that it's doing. And so we can see that the actual location in the content tree is this, but you can see that the URL is that. And the page says meow. And then the original URL still works. So let's talk about the template method pattern. Oh, so some caveats about the decorated pattern. It's great, but if you start decorating things to death, it's going to become a maintenance nightmare. And then, whoever gets your solution is going to hate you. So I recommend, sure, decorate things, but don't decorate too deeply, because you're just not going to be able to maintain it and troubleshoot problems and things like that. So, okay. Template method pattern. So this defines a main algorithm. I love this talk of algorithms in an abstract base class. And then you basically define stubs that you can override inside of your subclasses. Or you can also, have hooks. So you can have default functionality within the abstract base class, and then you can just change it in the subclasses if you need to. The stubs, basically, you have to implement them. They're going to be abstract inside of the abstract class. Here's what it would look like. So you have your abstract class that defines things that the subclasses either have to implement or they can override. And that's basically it. And then these are the things that you have to override or implement, typically implement. So let's see some code for that. So I'm going to go to the config file for this. And I got to zoom in. All right, so you guys know about content editor warnings in Sitecore. It's basically the yellow box that screams at you on an item when you're on it, and you have to either do something or take an action to fix it. So that's what this is doing. So basically, you know, I'm creating a content editor warning. I'm creating two of them actually. And what they're doing is, one's going to scream at you if you have, let's say, more than 20 items underneath a content item in your content tree. You know, and then this is all like intellectually whatever. You could set that to be whatever number you needed to set it to be. I set it as 20 here, just for the example. So that's what this guy is doing. But then I have another one that's basically gonna say, hey, you can't have certain characters in your item names, and it will scream at you. So for those characters, I chose the $ in number one. Let's just say that you have some weird business rules, and that's why you need to do it. And then we have, you know, I created an object called warning, which I'll show you. And basically, it has a title. So basically, what's going to show up in the yellow box. And then it's going to give you the ability to put a link in there to fix it. So, and what I'm doing here is I'm using some share UI commands for that. And this is the link text. So basically, this guy is getting injected into this guy, which is going to be a content editor warning. And then I have two of them here. And I have a share UI to rename this class item to be something different, and you get that rename item dialog. And then here you have the ability to bucket an item. So basically, I hope you can see that. I can zoom in a little bit. I had an item here that had the $ in it, and a number one, and a bunch of other stuff. And then I have way too many sub items. Look at all that. I think this had probably about 25, maybe 30 sub items. I mean, you can see that getting out of control very quickly. You know, you don't want to have, you know, typically more than 100 items under an item. But and then you can see that we have the yellow warnings right here yelling at you. Hey, you got to do something. You got to fix this. And you have the ability to convert it to a bucket. You have the ability to rename it. Whoops. Whoa, what happened here? Sorry, guys. So here, what I did is I clicked the rename item link, and then I got this dialog, and then I renamed it to something else to get rid of the back characters. And then I went to the next one. We can see that the new name is there. And then I decided to click on the next one to convert this into an item bucket. And then I got a dialog saying, hey, you sure you want to do this? I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then I got, you know, progress bar. And then now you can see that that's an item bucket. All right, so I want to talk about the strategy pattern real quickly. Actually, wait. So the template method pattern is a great pattern to use, but keep in mind that it makes things tightly coupled. And, you know, I mean, that is not good. You know, basically, you might have things that are, you know, because you're tightly coupled into your abstract base class. And the thing with that is, if you make a change in that, you could break stuff in one of the subclasses. So you have to be extremely careful. And you have to consider, you know, ramifications about making changes. You know, you're just going to bite yourself in the butt, so to say. And I just realized that I skipped over some code that I wanted to show that makes this all work. So let's do that. All right, so basically we have our abstract base class here. I've defined the process method for it. You need that for a pipeline processor in Sitecore. And so all it's doing is it's grabbing the warnings that you have defined in your configuration file. And the way we're doing that is we have the item. And then, we have to make sure, there's content on the warning. The warning is injected into here using the configuration factory. Actually, it's not. Hold on. So let's step over this quickly. Basically, we're going to grab warnings, and that's coming from the subclass. And then we're going to basically check if it has content on it. So I have a method defined on my warning instance. If there are no warnings, we get out. Otherwise, we set the title field, and then we set the text, and then we set any links to take an action on it. And I'm using the dictionary that, basically if I wanted to have this be multilingual, I could do that. That's not doing anything interesting. That's just translating it from the dictionary in Sitecore. So of those two different warnings, I have subclasses for my get content editor pipeline processor. So basically we're injecting the warning into here using the configuration factory. That's why it's defined in the configuration file here. And then I'm getting the warnings. I'm making sure there's no duplicates in here. That's why I'm doing a hash set. I'm putting them in there. And for all the characters that could be bad, let's say you put the $ in there 3 times, it's only gonna add it once just so it's more efficient. Then we return the warnings. And then the warnings are passed over to the abstract base class, basically the parent class, and then it's processed. So here we're just doing some due diligence. I'm certain properties on it to make sure things are there, or yell at the developer if there's stuff there. And then I got this cool splice function. I don't know why I did this, but I have it there to put everything together. Now, if we go over to the next class, the next subclass, this is basically doing something a little bit different. Basically, we're making sure that, if this thing has less than, let's say, 20 or equal to 20 sub-items, we basically just return an empty collection of warnings. There's no reason to yell at, the content author. Otherwise, we do pass back the warning like this, and then it's sent out over to the parent class. And then if I go here, here's my warning. There's nothing crazy about this. We're basically just injecting everything from the configuration factory, from the config file using configuration factory like this. And then command link is another class I created. And that just has text and a share UI command to pass to it. So let's go to the next pattern. Strategy pattern. So basically, this I love the definition of this because it's like, yeah, no kidding. I removed something that I had in here because it was just kind of like, yeah. I'll talk about that in a second, but basically it defines a family of classes with the same interface. That's all it does. So you have a bunch of instances that implement the same interface, and we just lump them together and reuse things, kind of like in one certain place, because it's all the same thing. And then basically each instance is encapsulated. So there might be another object that is using all these things that have the same interface. And I like this part of the definition. This actually, I think, is an official thing from the Gang of Four book. The Gang of Four book is the ultimate thing on design patterns. It came out in 1994. Makes instances interchangeable within that family. Well, yeah, no kidding. They have the same interface. Of course, they're going to be interchangeable. Why do you have to actually mention that? I don't know. So this is what it looks like. So up here we have something called the context that's going to use a strategy. And then you have multiple strategies defined. And they all have this, they have the same interface. They're defining the same execute method here, or you can call whatever method it is that you need, but they're all being used here as one big collection. All right, let's see some code for this. So this is going to be even scarier to look at. So basically, it's almost like the same stuff in the template method pattern, but the way we're going to be using it is going to be different, and that's why it's strategy. I'm defining, I have my strategy pattern, get content editor warnings pipeline processor. I'm going to generate a list of these warning generators. So basically this is another instance of something else, which I'll show you in a minute. And we're defining the same values in here as we did in the last one. 20, for our too many items warning. And then we're reusing the warning class that I showed you. And I'm injecting a list here, even though I don't need a list is only one thing, but I'm doing it like this because you can make it scalable. So this is the same text that we saw for the template method pattern. This code is doing the exact same thing as the last pattern. It's really, it's just for the content editor warnings, the same exact code running, but put into a different place and used in a certain way. So we have our share UI command text on what should be on that link inside of the yellow content editor warning. We have our message and our title. And then down here, we're creating another instance of this guy to do the bad characters in the item name. And in that case, I actually added an extra character. And then we have another one for renaming items. But let's look at the code real quickly. So here we have a content editor warnings class. And basically this is, this process method is going to be the pipeline processor. It's a little different because we're injecting all these different instances into it using configuration factory. When we create the instance, of course, I got to make sure this list is not null, so I make it something. And then the process test method is where things happen. So basically, it looks just like the other one. We're getting the warnings, and then we're making sure there are warnings, and if there aren't, we get out. Otherwise, we iterate over them, we add them to be shown to the user. And then down here, we have our get warnings method, which is called up here in the process method. That's basically just getting the warnings that are injected in here. Oh, we have a generator class. So this is where the context comes into play. So that's what we have here, this object here. We're passing it along from the caller. That's injected into here. If I go back here, this is the generator right here. So each one of these guys, and so that's, let's say the family of classes that are being used with it, in a certain context. And then we just iterate over all of them that are injected in. We have this set up, and then we add the warnings if there are any warnings, and then it gets returned to the content editor, and you can see the warnings. And then all the other code is basically the same. It's just translate text, do things like that, But if I go to this guy, this is basically the context object that we're using. Here we're basically injecting it. Well, actually, we're not injecting it at all. So let me go to the implementation of this. Oops. So each one of these guys has a context. This is basically the family of classes that are being reused. Here we're injecting things in from configuration. And then we're just using But just basically using the generator to generate the warning. Basically, that's all it's doing. And we have these other guys with different contexts. And then the generator itself, I think I saw it right. So we have generators that are basically, when we pass over the item that's on the content, in the content tree that we're on, we're passing it to that, and then we're looking for the warnings that are defined, and making a scene if things get, anything's triggered, like, oh, there are more than 20 sub items, or, or, there's a dollar sign in the item name, and things like that. So let me talk about this for a second before I go to Q&A. So strategy pattern's great. Why do I think it's great? It basically abstracts a lot of stuff out. However, it can become a maintenance nightmare as well. Because, I mean, as you could see, I was struggling finding things. And, let's say you're handing this over to somebody else who, doesn't know what you're doing. They're going to be like, what is this? I mean, you'll explain it to them and maybe they'll understand. But let's say we had 1 million of those generator classes. And let's say if they're all over the place and you can't find them. I mean, somebody's not going to be happy with you. So that's a caveat with this. And then in general, with design patterns, anyways, don't code things up front to, go into a pattern. Let the pattern evolve from your code over time. Because if you set up a certain pattern and you set something up using the wrong pattern, and you need to change something later on, well, there you go. You're gonna have to rewrite everything or rewrite a lot of code. So that would be my only caveat for design patterns. I love to use them, but they're not the end-all solution to everything. And with that, I have any questions? No questions? All right, thanks, guys.